So when you're ready to start weaving, you're going to need to set up your loom. And so that involves putting on what is called the warp. And the warps are strings that go up and down. And there's no way to weave without a warp. So I'm going to be showing you how to set up your warp on a chipboard loom. A chipboard loom is just a cardboard loom. It's very simple, and looms can get very complicated with lots and lots of warp threads. Some looms would have 1,000 or more, so we're only going to make about 14, maybe 18, I can't remember. But it's important how you set up your loom, because it will be difficult to have a successful weaving if you don't have it set up correctly. So the first thing we're going to do is have some tape handy, just 2 small pieces like this for starters, and I just put them on the side of the table. And then you need a ball of yarn or some kind of yarn that is coiled around something, and you don't want to cut it ahead of time. Cutting it ahead of time is usually a big mistake, because you use way more of it than you think you do, and then you end up with a mess. It either is too short and you have to start over again because it has to make the whole trip around, or it can become a big tangled mess. So what you're going to do is set yourself up with your yarn, keeping in mind that this is the color that will not show up very much on your weaving. The places you'll see it is on the ends and the tassels after you take it off the loom. So it should be a color that looks nice with your weaving, but it won't be the main color. You'll have lots of chances to add other colors. Okay, so after you have laid it out like so, you're going to be taping it down. Make sure you press hard on the tape, and depending on what kind of weaving you're going to do, you may need a little more tape, so that you're going about halfway up the loom. Notice that this does not quite reach the end. It's close. So the next step is you're going to start winding, and you want to make sure you have enough tape handy for when you're finished, and a pair of scissors. Grab my scissors. Okay, so let's start. Now the ball of yarn can just hang out on the floor if you're using a ball of yarn. If it's coming out of a box, then you have it easy. Now I want you to see that I'm going through this first notch. So all I did was I went through the first notch here, and then I'm going up and going through the first notch up here. So you're not missing any notches. I'm going to pull the camera back just a little so you can see a little more closely, or a little more view of the whole loom. And so I just keep going back and forth, being very careful not to miss any. As I'm pulling these warp threads, I want to make sure they're nice and tight. They shouldn't be so tight that the loom is starting to bend, but you can get them very tight. If you leave them loose, then you'll have a tough time with your weaving, because some of them will loosen up even more, and then you won't know where to go on your loom eventually. So just take your time with this step. It's important not to miss any. If you miss a notch, you'll need to repeat it again. I just went through my last notch. And now what I'm going to do is right near the end, I'll pull this down a bit and I'll cut it close to the end, just maybe a ½ inch away from where that notch is. And then I'm going to take my tape, which is handy, and I'll start by just stretching this out. And then it's a little tricky to tape. You can have a friend help you if you like, but I usually just stretch my yarn down as much as it'll go, and then I stretch it tight close to the edge. I put the tape on, being careful not to tape the warp thread next to it. rub both sides, and then I bring it around the back. And again, making sure that I don't cover up that warp thread. And then once I'm done with the smaller piece, I'm going to go about halfway up the loom with a longer piece. And again, really push that down. You don't want it coming loose. Just wrap it around. So at this point, it's a good idea to put your name on your loom, because until you really get started, it can be tricky to figure out which one is yours. So just go ahead and write it where about in the middle. Whoops, I have got a strange marker here. Well, we'll pretend this is in white, which is not showing up. But just write it on the tape with a Sharpie and you'll be fine. Okay, so that's the warp.